So for those of you who don't know about our venture into the toy world, we started doing online auctions. Oh gosh, more than 8. As a matter of fact, May 3rd was our 8-year anniversary of our first ever online auctions. There really wasn't anybody doing them at that time. There was one guy in the Joe groups, and they weren't really that popular. But we became known for our rants and for our stories, and people watched us from all over the world. We developed a fandom all over the world, and people from all over the place. Little kids would like write me letters and draw me pictures and send them in. And so over time, some of the stories that we tell, and by the way, not all the stories were kid appropriate. This is one of them. If you are watching this with your child, unless you want to have to explain something later, stop watching this and come back when you have a free minute. So we got known for these stories, and people loved some of the stories, and they would request that the stories be told again, or like they would tag people that they know to come to watch the story and say, you got to hear this story. And the most popular of these stories, that is also the most infamous, the sneeze machine. My parents were cleaning out their garage, and they found a lot of my childhood Joes. My brothers and I collected Joes. That's how I got into them as an adult. And they sent me a picture of them to say, are these your Joes? And I remember my very first Joe, bought it in 1985. It was an airtight. I got some Joes from 84. I never had Joes from 83, and I never had Joes from 82. I did get the mail-away Duke at the end of 1983 and the mail-away Hooded Cobra Commander at 83, but I never had any 82 or 83 carded Joes or vehicles. And there was a picture of a clutch in there. Now, for those of you guys who are not Joe fans, you probably don't understand why that's complicated, but it's because Clutch was only released 2 times in 82 and 83, and then not again until 93. But this was a 1982 Clutch with a straight arm, known as version 1, only released on card in 1982. But for some reason, he was in the batch of Joes that my parents sent me a picture of, and I could not, for the life of me, could not figure out why. What was the Clutch doing in there? And I'm sort of religiously attached to keeping track of all the Joe stuff. That's why I have spreadsheets of all the stuff that I had as a kid, like to a point where people probably think there's something wrong with me. I mean, there are stacks of reasons why they think that, but this verifies that for those that had doubts. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there looking at the phone, and sometimes you see something, and this was we call it the experience, and memories just like flooded back into my brain, and all of a sudden I remember. When we lived in Derby, Kansas, which is a little south of Wichita, when I was 10, 11 years old, we went to the private Christian school there. My parents worked at the school. We were really good friends with the pastor and his kids there. And my best friend was the same age as me, and he was one of the pastor's kids. And he had a couple of older brothers who were also older, but they had all these G.I. Joe items. And so we used to play G.I. Joes all the time together. I mean, that was what you did back then. And I remember I wanted those I liked this kid, his name was Steven, and we were best buddies. And his older brothers were older, like 16 and 17 years old. And we were constantly doing stuff to get their attention, but also like I wanted them to think that I was cool. And so like if they wanted me to do something, I would go do it because I wanted to be thought of as cool by these older kids. So we were over there playing Joes at one point, and I remember Steven kind of laughing and smirking, but we were all just having a good time. We were playing video games and Joes and old school Nintendo Wizards and Warriors. And Steven said, hey, they called me Robert back then. Robert, do you like to sneeze? And I was like, and the teenagers are laughing and they're shaking their heads. So I thought, clearly sneezing is cool. I was a very awkward kid. I didn't know how to be, I don't know. They're all talking about sneezes. So of course I like to sneeze, right? So I said, yeah, sure. And they said, well, we've got a machine that makes you sneeze. And I'm like, well, I was, what were you talking about? Well, we'll show you. So they get this item and they give it to me and they say, you put it on your nose and you turn it on and it makes you sneeze. So I was like, okay. And they were like, come on, go ahead and do it. Well, I didn't know. And I mean, I'm with these older kids. I don't know. I just don't want to be seen as not cool. So I turn it on, and what do you know? It made my nose itch, and all of a sudden I started sneezing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sneezing. I remember being so excited. And so, like, I was thinking I was cool. The older kids finally accepted me. They're slapping me on the back. And like, yeah, sneeze again. So I thought I was cool. And I was so happy. I remember being so happy about this. So my family came over for dinner that night, to the pastor's family. And we are sitting, we're sitting there at the table. And they're having the usual conversations. Very traditional, setting. And the kids only spoke when they're spoken to or they had a question. And so I piped up and I said, hey, Mom and Dad, why can't we get a sneeze machine? Can we get one? And my parents were like, what are you talking about? So everybody looks at me quizzically. The faces on the boys got very, very red. And they're like, what is a sneeze machine? And so I proceeded to tell them that earlier today, we went into his parents' bedroom and they pulled the drawer out and they pulled a sneeze machine out of the drawer, and I put it on my nose and turned it on and it vibrated and it made my nose itch and I sneezed. And I was like, and I didn't realize it, but I love sneezing. And all of a sudden, something real weird happened at the table. The pastor grabs the two oldest teenage boys and yells, "Boys!" and takes them in the other room. And you can just hear him just yelling at them. I don't understand what happens because, again, I was a very socially awkward 11-year-old kid. I didn't know what was going on. 12, maybe I was 12 at this time. But I do remember, like, them coming out and apologizing to me and then giving me that clutch and saying, "You can have this, we're sorry." I didn't know what they were sorry for. I guess it was because we weren't supposed to play with the mom and dad's sneeze machine and they didn't ask permission. That was what I took away from that. And so I asked my parents, and they're like, "Yep, that's right. You should always ask permission before using something that's not yours." And I'm sitting on the couch, here I am in my 40s, laughing. I was 40, maybe I was about 40. I think I was 40 or 41. I'm on the couch laughing like, man, that's where that clutch came from. I can't. Oh my God, a sneeze machine. Oh my God. I realized at 30 years later what had happened. And I sat on the couch and I didn't have a nervous breakdown, but I had an, oh my God, what have I done moment. Because, as a kid, as an adult, like, oh God, by the way, what a crazy prank to pull off. But hey, that's for another story. McDonald Brothers, I'm coming for you one of these days. So, to make a long story short, I shared the story of the sneeze machine multiple times over the years, and there was a bunch of guys that loved it. So, one year, I had a special delivery from a guy, but they went all out. They made me a custom graded sneeze machine, and this is a legitimately graded toy. You can see the clutch on there. They got the V1.5 clutch instead of the V1. My only complaint was they used the V1.5 instead of the V1, but it is in fact graded and 80 because it lists lightly used. So they decorated the sneeze machine, always professional grading services, an actual graded sneeze machine, and it is one of my favorite stories to share in the G.I. Joe world. It obviously had the memory of being a kid and then having the G.I. Joe clutch and realizing what really happened as an adult. But I shared this story so many times that a guy from Mississippi got with a guy from St. Louis and made this and put it together. And then the guy from Mississippi actually at one of the meetups brought it and hand-delivered it to me as a hilarious gag gift. So it is one of the prized pieces in my toy collection is this graded sneeze machine. We're going to probably try to do more of these stories that come out of our Joe collecting and our Joe world. But I get asked still to this day to tell the sneeze machine story. Now you guys have it forever.